Okay, Kevin here. I'm back, and in our first two segments on the topic of introverted intuition, we discussed really in the first session what introverted intuition is not. And then in the second session, really what introverted intuition is as experienced primarily by the INFJ. In this third segment, I'm going to compare the different focus between the INFJ and the INTJ in terms of their expression of introverted intuition. I find this really interesting because this isn't a topic on which we can look at the theory of the Myers-Briggs itself and say, based on the theory, this is the answer to the question. In this case, we have to actually deduce the answer from what we're observing as being the difference between the INFJ and the INTJ. And so, both the INFJ and the INTJ start from a dominant place, so that is, their dominant function, their dominant cognitive function is introverted intuition. So there's that internal focus as we're taking in experience, and then it's considered in terms of intuition, that is, what patterns emerge, what systems emerge, what insights emerge, what visions emerge for the overall experiential field. So it's the same starting point. However, in the next step in the functional stack, the INFJ goes to extroverted feeling, so it's that interpersonal focus, and the INTJ goes to extroverted thinking, which is the, more of the material world impersonal focus. And so the question that I have is why? Okay? Why do they choose to take that focus in a different direction from the same starting point? The second function does not explain that. It just says where they take that focus to in that second function, but it doesn't say why they go there. So it's my hypothesis that though the INTJ and the INFJ are both using that introverted intuition as a starting point, even before they go to that second step in their stack of functions, they already have a let's just call it an orientation that is predetermined based on temperament and DNA. And so what I believe is happening is that the INFJ, from the beginning in their use of introverted intuition, has a primarily non-material focus in how they're using their introverted intuition. And the INTJ has a primarily material focus. Now, in that beginning place, INFJs and INTJs are very similar in that they'll sit back, they'll reflect, they'll take time to sort of absorb all of the experiential field in order to come up with systems, interrelationships, patterns, visions, and so on. However, it's my theory, my hypothesis, that even there in that beginning place, they're considering different things internally. And they've got a different focus internally. And once again, I believe the INTJ has that material focus, a material world focus, and that the INFJ has a non-material world focus. So when they take that next step into the second step in their functional stack, they're moving to the area in which they're most comfortable even before they take that step. And so the INFJ is then going to a consideration of, well, how can I apply this introverted intuition now in the extroverted feeling world, in my relationships, in interpersonal patterns, and even in spirituality that's expressed through people and through life. On the other hand, the INTJ is going from what's a pre-established material focus when they're using their introverted intuition into extroverted thinking. That works much better. The material world focus works much better with an extroverted thinking focus in that second step. That's where it can best be applied in considering the systems and interrelationships within the material world. And so you'll see INTJs being good at such things as, developing computerized robots, for example, that take into account tons of variables and that come up with the most efficient way to develop a system and then manage large systems of information and data in the external material world. The same sort of intuitive introverted process is used in the beginning, but once again it's applied in a very different way, and the focus is very different with introverted intuition versus with INFJs versus INTJs. So this brings me to the point where I have to admit I'm very jealous of INTJs because of that opportunity to, in very concrete, material ways, benefit from that introverted intuition. And typically, INTJs do very well in the world of employment and income and all those material world sort of pats on the back, because their intuition, their introverted intuition has a very concrete output in the real world that they then benefit from. Whereas it's much less direct with the INFJ, who can be also very successful in a variety of ways, but it's usually less direct, it's usually less concrete, and I would say it's less consistent in terms of worldly success, so to speak. So I'm just putting it out there right now. I'm jealous of INTJs for that reason. Just an aside here, I've noticed that, and this is, I think, pretty much common knowledge within the Myers-Briggs typing community, that INFJs and INTJs both tend to be types that want to be right or believe they're right. And that comes out of that introverted intuition that arrives at these conclusions, these visions, these insights about the entire field of experience that usually is quite accurate. Now, something that the INTJ and the INFJ can both get tripped up by is that vision or that insight of the key patterns and relationships and how it all fits together is based on usually what's already occurred, or maybe at best what's currently occurring. But the material world changes. Now, with some things, perhaps like topics having to do with physics and maybe spirituality as well, where you go deep enough and look for deep enough patterns, things either don't change at all as far as we know, or they change much less frequently. And so with those deeper issues, maybe that's the exception to the rule that things change. And of course, things are always changing in the material world. But that is one area where INFJs and INTJs really need to make sure to check themselves and get feedback and to regularly reinvest in observing what actually is going on in the immediate environment, because things can change, which can change patterns in relationships, insights, systems, visions for the future based on what's actually happening at a deep level now. So, hopefully that's been helpful. Like I say, it's always intrigued me that even though INTJ and INFJ start from that same place in introverted intuition, even before it moves into that second step within the functional stack, there seems to be an orientation that's present that I believe is based on DNA and a sort of deep level of temperament that does not change. So, if you want to comment, please feel free to do so. I'd love to know that you're watching these video segments. I find this stuff fascinating, and I hope you do as well. And I'll be back with another segment on introverted intuition in the near future. Have a good one. See ya.